I think once somebody attempts to separate faith and works in regard to salvation, it can get a little tricky. Um, so when we look in the Old Testament before Christ came, like way back in the beginning in Genesis, right? We have like Abraham and Noah, who is said to be blameless among the people, and in 622 he did all that God commanded him to. And like Genesis 19, when Lot's wife like looks back like behind her at Sodom and Gomorrah, she is turned into a pillar of salt because they're told not to look back. So just like a couple brief examples, I mean, we look at like Cain and Abel, right? Abel was bringing a good sacrifice, the fat portions of like the best cattle, and then Cain was just bringing forward fruits of the land, and then like God was pleased with Abel but not with Cain. So we see these examples of where an element of an action is used to God's approval and used for God saying, yes, I accept you. When we look into the New Testament then at some of the parables that Christ even gave, looking at Matthew 25, like the parable of the talents, right? So a master goes away and he gives three different servants different amounts, and then when he comes back, one had doubled it, the other one had doubled theirs, and then the other said, oh, I held on to it, I buried it because I was afraid I'd lose it, and he takes that away, and he says, be gone, lazy servant. And so that one didn't do anything, and everything that he did have was taken away. So when we start to separate these things, so Christ gives us the two new commandments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And by doing this, we then fulfill the 10 commandments and the laws of the Old Testament, because ultimately, if we're loving our neighbor as ourselves, we're not going to murder them and commit the 6th commandment. And then we're not going to lie to people, or we're not going to like covet and envy them if we're loving them as ourselves. And it's like that golden rule, do unto others as we would have them do unto us. So I use this book that's early Christian beliefs. It's all pre-Nicene, so it's before 225 AD. And when looking at salvation, it talks about, the role of Christ alone, the role of grace and faith, the role of obedience, and it talks about these different things that are implemented into salvation. So under the role of obedience, St. Clement of Rome in 96 AD said, we're justified by our works and not our words. So it brings, that's just like the common actions speak louder than words now. So we can say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, and then not follow any of these rules or not act in a way that may be a little more holy, the holiness that we're called to. And from my conversation with people who have fallen away from the church or who simply just don't want to join, is that it's full of hypocrites. That it's basically full of people who claim this love of God, that claim that they follow what the church teaches, but then they don't see that in their actions demonstrating out. So one of my favorite quotes is by St. Francis de Sales, and he says, do not fear that the duties imposed upon us by obedience, though numerous and heavy, will distract us from our union with God. In fact, when they are performed for his glory, they have the power to unite us closely to him. How could the very things that join our will to his draw us away from him? So I just really like reflecting on that, just understanding when we're performing these works for God's glory, how could they possibly be pulling us away from them when it's uniting our will to his, when we're serving the homeless, when we're treating every person as if they were Christ. So I think that it can be dangerous territory, because if we go by works alone, in James it says faith without works is dead and works without faith is dead. So they go hand in hand, and one will produce the other in simultaneous ways. Like you can have faith first produce, and like God's grace helps produce those works, and then if we're doing those works, then we begin to kind of experience God in a different way as well. So just kind of basic understandings, and hopefully it makes sense. So keeping today brief, so I hope that you guys have a happy Sunday. Enjoy the weather. I'm out in Colorado, so it's pretty nice out here, and just enjoying my time in the mountains. So I'll see you guys again next week. I'll look forward to questions and comments. I'll talk to you soon.